The rain came down like shattered glass on the morning Naomi Brooks made the choice that would destroy her life, and then rebuild it into something she never imagined possible. 3 blocks from the office, where her paycheck hung by a thread, she watched a stranger crumple to the pavement, his ankle twisted at an impossible angle. She had 45 seconds to make her shift. Her son needed that insurance, that salary, that job. But she knelt anyway. What she didn't know was that the bleeding man on the sidewalk owned the company about to fire her, and he was watching everything she did next. If you want to see how one moment of courage changed everything, stay with me until the end, and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Now let's begin. The alarm screamed at 5:47 a.m., but Naomi Brooks was already awake. She'd been staring at the ceiling for 20 minutes, running calculations in her head. The same calculations she ran every morning. Rent was due in 9 days. Jordan's asthma inhaler needed a refill. The check engine light in her 12-year-old Honda had been glowing like a warning from the universe for 3 weeks, and her bank account sat at $247.18, waiting to be carved into pieces too small to matter. She rolled out of bed before the second alarm could sound, her feet hitting the cold linoleum floor of the cramped apartment she shared with her 10-year-old son. The bathroom mirror showed her a woman who looked older than 32, dark circles carved beneath brown eyes that used to sparkle, hair pulled back into a functional bun that had stopped being stylish years ago. She splashed water on her face and told herself the same lie she told herself every morning. Today will be better. Down the narrow hallway, Jordan's door stood half open. She peeked inside and found him curled beneath his Captain America comforter, one skinny arm thrown across his pillow, his inhaler on the nightstand like a small plastic guardian. Her heart clenched the way it always did when she looked at him, love so fierce it bordered on pain. He was the reason for everything. The reason she worked a job that barely respected her. The reason she smiled when she wanted to scream. The reason she kept showing up even when showing up felt impossible. She kissed his forehead without waking him and left a note on the kitchen counter in her careful handwriting. Cereal in the cupboard. Text me when you get to school. Love you to the moon. Mom. By 6:35, she was out the door. The number 12 bus wheezed to a stop at the corner of 8th and Madison, belching diesel fumes into the gray morning. Naomi climbed aboard, swiped her transit card, and found a seat near the back beside a woman scrolling TikTok with the volume too loud. She closed her eyes and let the city noise wash over her. Horns, brakes, someone's muffled argument through a cell phone. She worked at Solara Dynamics, a tech firm in downtown Crestview that designed supply chain software for multinational corporations. It was the kind of company that threw around words like synergy and disruption while paying its administrative staff barely above minimum wage. Naomi had been there for 4 years, working in operations support, a fancy title for someone who processed invoices, fielded complaints, and kept the machinery running while people in corner offices took credit. Her supervisor, Patricia Landon, was a woman who wore ambition like cheap perfume and treated kindness as a competitive disadvantage. Patricia had written Naomi up twice in the past 6 months, once for taking a sick day when Jordan had a fever, once for being 11 minutes late after a bus delay. The message was clear. You are replaceable. And maybe she was, but she couldn't afford to find out. The bus lurched to a stop 6 blocks from the Solara building, and Naomi checked her phone. 7:42 a.m. She needed to clock in by 8, and the walk usually took 12 minutes. Tight, but doable. She stepped off the bus into a city that smelled like rain and exhaust. The sky hung low and swollen, clouds the color of old bruises. She pulled her thin jacket tighter and started walking, her shoes, black flats with a split along one sole, slapping softly against the wet pavement. 3 blocks to go. That's when she heard the scream. It was sharp and sudden, a woman's voice cracking through the morning air like a whip. Naomi's head snapped toward the sound. Across the intersection, near the entrance to a coffee shop, a small crowd was forming. People stood in a loose circle, staring down at something, or someone, on the ground. Naomi hesitated. She had 2 minutes of cushion, maybe 3 if she walked fast. But then she saw him. A man, maybe in his 50s, lay crumpled on the sidewalk, one leg bent at an unnatural angle. His face was pale, twisted in pain. A high-end racing bike lay a few feet away, its front wheels still spinning. A younger guy in spandex and a helmet stood nearby, hands on his hips, breathing hard. "I didn't see him!" the cyclist shouted to no one in particular. "He just stepped out!" The injured man groaned, trying to sit up. His ankle was clearly broken. Naomi could see it even from across the street. And no one was helping him. People were filming. A couple were shaking their heads. One woman was on her phone, maybe calling 911, maybe just texting her group chat about the drama. But no one was with him. Naomi looked at her watch. 7:51. She looked at the man on the ground, and then she ran. Not away, toward. She pushed through the small crowd and dropped to her knees beside him, ignoring the dirty water soaking through her pants. Up close, she could see he was well-dressed. Tailored gray slacks, a button-down shirt that probably cost more than her rent, a watch that gleamed even in the dim morning light. But right now, none of that mattered. Right now, he was just a man in pain. "Sir," she said gently, placing a hand on his shoulder, "try not to move. Help is coming." His eyes found hers, sharp, intelligent eyes, even through the haze of pain. "My ankle," he rasped. "I think it's broken." "I know, just breathe, stay still." She looked up at the crowd. "Did someone call 911? A young woman with purple hair nodded. "Yeah, they're on the way." "Good." Naomi turned back to the man. "What's your name?" "Marcus," he said through gritted teeth. "Marcus Ellington." The name didn't register. She was too focused on keeping him calm, on making sure he didn't go into shock. She pulled off her jacket and folded it beneath his head, even though it meant she'd be cold for the rest of the walk. "I'm Naomi," she said. "You're going to be okay, Marcus. Just keep your eyes on me." He did. The ambulance arrived 7 minutes later, lights flashing, sirens cutting through the morning. 2 paramedics jumped out and took over with professional efficiency, checking his vitals, stabilizing his leg, loading him onto a stretcher. Naomi stepped back, giving them space, her hand shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. One of the paramedics, a stocky man with kind eyes, glanced at her. "You stay with him?" "Yeah." "Good. That matters." He nodded toward the ambulance. "We're taking him to Mercy General. You family?" "No, She stopped. "I just didn't want him to be alone." The paramedic smiled. "World needs more of that." They loaded Marcus into the ambulance, and just before the doors closed, he turned his head and looked at her one more time. His expression was unreadable. Gratitude, maybe, or curiosity, or something else entirely. Then the doors slammed shut, and the ambulance pulled away, leaving Naomi standing on the wet sidewalk in her soaked pants and shirt sleeves, shivering. She checked her phone. 8:14 a.m. Her stomach dropped. She started running. By the time Naomi burst through the glass doors of Solara Dynamics, it was 8:22. Her hair was plastered to her forehead, her clothes were damp and dirty, and her heart was hammering so hard she thought it might crack a rib. The security guard, an older man named Leon, who usually smiled at her, just shook his head. "You're late, Ms. Brooks." "I know. There was an accident. I had to help. You better get upstairs." She didn't wait for the elevator. She took the stairs 2 at a time, her breath burning in her lungs, and pushed through the door to the 3rd floor. The open plan office buzzed with the low hum of productivity, keyboards clicking, phones ringing, the coffee machine hissing in the break room. Patricia Landon stood beside Naomi's desk, arms crossed, lips pressed into a thin line. "Ms. Brooks," Patricia said coldly, "my office, now." Naomi's legs felt like lead as she followed her supervisor down the hallway. Patricia's office was small and sterile, decorated with motivational posters that felt like threats. Excellence is not an option. It's a requirement. Patricia closed the door and sat behind her desk, fingers steepled. "Do you know what time it is?" "I'm sorry. There was an emergency." "There's always an emergency with you, isn't there?" Patricia's voice was sharp, clipped. "A sick child, a late bus, and now what? An accident you claim you had to stop for?" "It wasn't a claim. A man was hurt. I don't care." Patricia's eyes were ice. "You have been late 3 times in the past 2 months. You have been warned. You signed the attendance policy." Naomi's throat tightened. "Please, I need this job. My son." Your personal circumstances are not my concern. Patricia opened a drawer and pulled out a manila folder. Effective immediately, your employment with Solara Dynamics is terminated. The words hit like a fist to the chest. You can't. I can. And I am. Patricia slid a single sheet of paper across the desk. Sign this. Security will escort you out. You'll receive your final paycheck by mail. Naomi stared at the paper. Her hands were shaking, her vision blurred. Please, she whispered. I have a son. I need the insurance. Patricia's expression didn't change. You should have thought of that before you decided other people's problems were more important than your job. For a moment, Naomi just sat there, frozen. Then, slowly, she picked up the pen. She signed. 15 minutes later, Naomi walked out of Solara Dynamics carrying a cardboard box with 4 years of her life inside it. A coffee mug Jordan had made her in 2nd grade. A photo of the two of them at the beach. A handful of pens and a stapler she'd bought herself because the company ones were always broken. Leon met her at the door. I'm sorry, Ms. Brooks. She nodded, unable to speak. Outside, the rain had started again, cold and relentless. She stood on the sidewalk, clutching her box, and let the water soak through her shirt. She didn't cry. She couldn't afford to cry. She just stood there, trying to figure out how she was going to tell her son that everything was about to fall apart. That night, Naomi sat at the kitchen table with her laptop open, scrolling through job listings that all required experience she didn't have or degrees she couldn't afford. Jordan was asleep in the next room, his soft snores barely audible through the thin walls. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her press the green button. Hello? Ms. Brooks? The voice was professional, female, unfamiliar. This is Carolyn Reed. I'm calling from the office of Marcus Ellington. Naomi sat up straighter. Who? The man you helped this morning. Mr. Ellington would like to speak with you. Would you be available to come to Solara Dynamics tomorrow at 10 a.m.? Naomi's heart stopped. I was fired today. I know, Carolyn said gently. That's why he wants to see you. Naomi barely slept. She dressed carefully the next morning, her one good blouse, black slacks she hadn't worn in months, the shoes without the split. She took the bus back downtown, her stomach a knot of nerves and confusion. When she walked into the Solara building, Leon smiled at her. Good to see you, Ms. Brooks. Head on up. Top floor. She'd never been to the top floor. The elevator opened into a world she didn't recognize. Glass walls, modern art, furniture that looked like it cost more than her car. A receptionist with perfect hair directed her down a hallway to a corner office with a view of the entire city. And there, behind a massive desk, sat Marcus Ellington. His ankle was in a cast, propped on a stool, but his eyes were the same, sharp, assessing, kind. Ms. Brooks, he said, standing with the help of a crutch. Please sit. She did, gripping the armrest like a lifeline. I owe you an apology, Marcus said. Naomi blinked. For what? For what happened yesterday. He gestured to his ankle. I asked my assistant to pull the security footage from the street. I saw you stop. I saw you stay. And I saw you leave in a hurry. He paused. I also saw that you were fired for being late. Her throat tightened. It was my fault. I knew the policy. It was an unjust policy, Marcus said quietly. And it was wrong. He opened a folder on his desk. I've reviewed your file, 4 years with this company. Stellar performance reviews until Patricia Landon became your supervisor. No complaints, no issues. Just a single mother trying to survive. Naomi said nothing. Marcus leaned forward. I want to offer you a position. Her heart stuttered, What? Executive assistant. To me. Double your previous salary, full benefits, flexible hours, and a signing bonus to cover whatever you lost yesterday. She stared at him. Why? Because you stopped, Marcus said simply. When everyone else walked past, you stopped. That tells me everything I need to know about who you are. Naomi's eyes filled with tears. I don't understand. You don't have to. You just have to say yes. She looked at him, this man she'd knelt beside on a wet sidewalk, this stranger who held her future in his hands. and she said the only thing that made sense. Yes. Naomi walked out of Marcus Ellington's office in a daze, her mind spinning like a wheel that had come loose from its axle. The elevator descended in silence, the numbers lighting up one by one, and she watched them without really seeing. 48th floor, 32nd, 21st, each one bringing her closer to the ground, closer to reality, closer to the moment when she'd have to figure out if what just happened was real or some kind of fever dream brought on by stress and desperation. Double salary, full benefits, flexible hours, executive assistant to the CEO. 24 hours ago, she'd been fired for being late. Now she had a job that paid more than she'd ever imagined earning. The lobby doors opened and Leon looked up from his security desk with a grin that creased his weathered face. "Ms. Brooks, you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." "I think I just did," she whispered. He laughed, a warm sound that made her feel slightly more grounded. "Good ghost or bad ghost?" "I honestly don't know yet." Outside, the city had shifted into afternoon mode. Lunch crowds spilling onto sidewalks, food trucks lined up along the curbs, the smell of halal meat and hot pretzels mixing with exhaust fumes. Naomi stood on the corner, pulled out her phone, and stared at the screen for a full minute before her fingers started moving. She called Jordan's school. "Crestview Elementary, this is Monica speaking." "Hi, this is Naomi Brooks, Jordan Brooks's mother. I'm just calling to let you know I'll be picking him up today instead of him taking the bus." There was a pause, the sound of keyboard clicks. "Oh, that's nice. He'll be happy about that. Pickup is at 3:15. "I'll be there. Thank you." She hung up and checked the time, 1:45. She had 90 minutes to process the fact that her entire life had just changed, and she had no idea how to do it, so she did what she always did when the world stopped making sense. She walked. Downtown Crestview wasn't beautiful, but it had character. Old buildings stood next to new glass towers like mismatched teeth. Street vendors sold scarves and phone cases from folding tables. A man played saxophone on the corner of 5th and Broad, his case open for tips, the notes floating through the air like smoke. Naomi dropped a $5 bill into the case, more than she could afford yesterday, pocket change compared to what she'd be making now, and kept walking. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Ms. Brooks, this is Carolyn Reed, Mr. Ellington's assistant. Welcome to the team. Your start date is Monday, 9 a.m. I'll have HR send over paperwork this afternoon. If you need anything before then, don't hesitate to reach out. Looking forward to working with you." Naomi read it 3 times, then saved the number. Monday, 4 days away. 4 days to figure out how to be someone she'd never been before. She stopped at a bench near the fountain in Memorial Plaza and sat down, watching pigeons fight over a discarded sandwich. An older woman in a purple coat was feeding them, tossing breadcrumbs with the precision of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. "You look troubled, baby," the woman said without looking up. Naomi glanced over. "Is it that obvious?" "Mm-hmm. You got that look? Like life just handed you something you didn't ask for, and now you don't know what to do with it." Naomi laughed, a short, breathless sound. "That's exactly it." The woman tossed another handful of crumbs. "Good thing or bad thing?" "Good, I think, but it doesn't feel real yet." "Best things usually don't." The woman finally looked at her, dark eyes sharp and knowing. "You'll figure it out. Just don't let fear make you throw it away before you even try." Naomi nodded slowly. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. Thank yourself. You're the one who showed up." The woman stood, brushed crumbs from her coat, and walked away, leaving Naomi sitting alone with a strange sense of calm settling over her chest. At 3:15, she stood outside Crestview Elementary, watching the doors burst open and children pour out like water from a broken dam. Jordan appeared in the middle of the crowd, backpack bouncing on his narrow shoulders, his face lighting up when he saw her. "Mom!" He ran to her and she caught him in a hug that lasted longer than usual. "What are you doing here?" "I wanted to surprise you." "Did you get off work early?" She pulled back and looked at him, this boy who was her entire world, who deserved so much more than she'd been able to give him. "Actually, I have some news." His eyes widened. "Good news or bad news?" "Good news. Really good news. But let's talk about it over ice cream. 10 minutes later, they sat in a corner booth at Scoops and Smiles, Jordan working his way through a double chocolate cone while Naomi nursed a small vanilla cup she didn't really want. She told him about the accident, about helping Marcus, about getting fired, and then, impossibly, getting hired again. Jordan listened with the kind of focus he usually reserved for video game tutorials. When she finished, he set down his cone, chocolate smeared across his chin. So you got a better job because you were nice to someone? I guess so. That's so cool, Mom. He grinned. Like a superhero origin story, except instead of getting powers, you got money. She laughed, real and genuine. Something like that. Does this mean we can get a new car? Maybe, eventually. Does this mean I can get new sneakers, the ones Malik has? We'll see. Does this mean, Jordan? She reached across the table and took his hand. It means things are going to be a little easier, that's all. We're still us, okay? He squeezed her fingers. Okay, but can we at least get pizza tonight instead of spaghetti again? Yeah, baby, we can get pizza. That weekend passed in a blur of paperwork, phone calls, and quiet moments of disbelief. HR sent over contracts, benefits packages, tax forms, all of it stamped with the Solara Dynamics logo that had once represented her livelihood and then her termination, and now represented something else entirely. She read every word twice, afraid that somewhere in the fine print would be a clause that said, "Just kidding," but it never appeared. Saturday afternoon, her best friend Simone showed up at her door with a bottle of cheap champagne and a box of donuts. Okay, I need to hear this story from the beginning, Simone said, kicking off her shoes and settling onto Naomi's worn couch like she owned it. Because when you texted me that you got fired and then hired in the same week, I thought you'd finally lost it. Naomi poured champagne into coffee mugs. She didn't own proper glasses, and told the story again. Simone listened, eyes growing wider with each detail. Girl, Simone said when she finished, this is literally a movie. I know. Like a Hallmark movie, except you're black and this is actually interesting. Naomi snorted. I don't know if it's interesting. I'm terrified. Of what? Of screwing it up. Of not being good enough. Of him realizing he made a mistake. She took a sip of champagne. It was too sweet and fizzed in her nose. I've never been an executive assistant. I don't know what I'm doing. Simone set down her mug and looked at her with the kind of directness that had made them friends 15 years ago. You know what you're doing. You've been doing it your whole life. What do you mean? You show up. You work hard. You care about people. That's all this is, just in a bigger office. It's not that simple. It never is. But you're going to do it anyway, because that's who you are. Simone raised her mug. To Naomi Brooks, the woman who stopped. Naomi clinked her mug against Simone's. The woman who stopped. They drank, and for the first time in years, Naomi let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, things were going to be okay. Monday morning arrived with the kind of brightness that felt almost aggressive. Naomi woke up at 5:30, showered, and stood in front of her closet staring at clothes that suddenly felt inadequate. She settled on the same black slacks and blouse she'd worn to the interview, added a blazer she'd bought at Goodwill 3 years ago, and hoped it would be enough. Jordan shuffled into the kitchen as she was making coffee, still in his pajamas, hair sticking up at odd angles. Big day, he said, rubbing his eyes. Big day, she agreed. You're going to be great, Mom. She kissed the top of his head. When did you get so wise? I've always been wise. You just don't listen. She arrived at Solara Dynamics at 8:45, gave herself a pep talk in the lobby bathroom, and took the elevator to the 48th floor with her heart hammering against her ribs. The doors opened, and Carolyn Reed was waiting. Carolyn was everything Naomi expected an executive assistant to be: polished, efficient, elegant in a way that seemed effortless. She was maybe 50, with silver-streaked hair pulled into a low bun and a smile that managed to be both professional and genuinely warm. Naomi, she said, extending a hand, it's wonderful to finally meet you in person. They shook, and Carolyn's grip was firm. Let me show you around. The executive suite was a different universe from the third floor where Naomi had worked before. Everything was quieter, cleaner, more expensive. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. The coffee machine looked like it belonged in a spaceship. Even the air felt different, cooler, crisper, like it had been imported from somewhere better. Carolyn led her to a desk positioned just outside Marcus's office. It was sleek, modern, with two large monitors, a leather chair that probably cost more than her monthly rent, and a nameplate that read Naomi Brooks, executive assistant to the CEO. Naomi stared at it. "That's really my desk?" "It really is." Carolyn smiled. "I've put together a training schedule for your first week. We'll go over Mr. Ellington's calendar management, correspondence protocols, meeting preparation, travel arrangements, everything you'll need to know. But don't worry, I'll be right here if you need anything." "Why are you being so nice to me?" The question slipped out before Naomi could stop it. Carolyn tilted her head. "Because you deserve it, and because Marcus doesn't make mistakes about people. If he says you belong here, you belong here." Before Naomi could respond, Marcus's office door opened and he emerged on crutches, his ankles still in a cast. He smiled when he saw her. "Naomi, good morning." "Good morning, Mr. Ellington." "Marcus," he corrected gently, "we're going to be working closely together. Let's skip the formality." "Okay, Marcus, va?" He gestured toward his office. "Do you have a few minutes? I'd like to talk about what we're building here." She followed him inside, and he settled into his chair with a slight grimace, propping his injured ankle on the desk. The office was massive, bigger than her entire apartment, with a view that stretched all the way to the river. "How's the ankle?" she asked. "Painful. Humbling. A good reminder that I'm not invincible." He smiled. "But it's healing. Thanks to you." "I didn't do anything." "You did everything." He leaned forward. "Naomi, I want to be clear about why you're here. It's not charity. It's not gratitude. It's because I saw something in you that I need on my team." "What did you see?" "Integrity, courage, the ability to make hard choices when it matters." He paused. "I've been running this company for 12 years. I've built something successful, but I've also let it become something I'm not proud of." Naomi frowned. "What do you mean?" "Policies like the one that got you fired. A culture that punishes kindness and rewards cutthroat efficiency. I've been so focused on profit margins and shareholder value that I forgot what actually matters." He met her eyes. "I want to change that, and I want your help. I'm just an assistant. You're more than that. You're someone who understands what it's like to struggle, to choose between paying rent and buying groceries, to work for people who don't see you as human." His voice was quiet but fierce. "I want to launch an initiative that supports employees like you, single parents, people working multiple jobs, people one emergency away from losing everything. But I can't do it alone. I need someone who's lived it." Naomi's throat tightened. "What kind of initiative?" "I don't know yet. That's what we're going to figure out together." He smiled. "What do you say? Are you in?" She thought about Jordan, about the years of scraping by, of choosing which bills to pay late, of lying awake at night terrified of what would happen if she got sick, or the car broke down, or the rent went up. She thought about all the people still living that life, still trapped in the same cycle she'd barely escaped. "I'm in," she said. The first week was a whirlwind. Carolyn taught her how to manage Marcus's calendar, which was a complex puzzle of board meetings, investor calls, conference appearances, and strategic planning sessions. She learned how he liked his coffee, black, no sugar, and how he preferred emails formatted. She sat in on meetings where people threw around terms like quarterly projections and market penetration, and tried not to look as lost as she felt. But she also learned that Marcus was different from any executive she'd encountered. He remembered names. He asked about people's families. When a junior developer gave a presentation that flopped, Marcus didn't humiliate him. He asked thoughtful questions and found the valuable parts buried in the mess. "You're good at this," Carolyn said one afternoon as they reviewed meeting notes. "At what?" "At seeing what people need. Marcus has always been brilliant, but he can get lost in his head. You bring him back to earth." Naomi wasn't sure that was true, but she appreciated the thought. On Thursday, Marcus called her into his office and asked her to sit in on a meeting with the head of HR, a sharp-eyed woman named Denise Cartwright, who looked like she'd never smiled in her life. "Denise," Marcus said, "I want to talk about our parental leave policy." Denise's expression didn't change. What about it? It's insufficient. 2 weeks paid leave for a new parent is insulting. It's industry standard. Then the industry is wrong. Marcus glanced at Naomi. What do you think? Naomi froze. Every instinct screamed at her to stay quiet, to not make waves, to let the people who knew better handle it. But then she thought about Jordan, about coming back to work 6 days after giving birth because she couldn't afford unpaid leave, about pumping breast milk in bathroom stalls during her lunch break. I think, she said slowly, that 2 weeks isn't enough time to heal, let alone bond with a child. And I think making people choose between their job and their family is cruel. Denise's eyebrows rose. Marcus smiled. See, he said. That's what I'm talking about. Denise, I want a proposal on my desk by next week for extended parental leave. 12 weeks minimum, fully paid for all employees regardless of gender. That's going to cost. I don't care what it costs. Make it happen. Denise left, looking like she'd swallowed something sour. When the door closed, Marcus turned to Naomi. That was perfect. I probably shouldn't have spoken up. That's not my place. It absolutely is your place. That's exactly why you're here. Over the next 2 weeks, they met regularly to discuss the foundation of what Marcus was calling the Bright Horizon Initiative. He brought ideas. She brought reality checks. He wanted to offer free childcare. She pointed out that not everyone worked 9-to-5 schedules. He wanted to create emergency funds. She suggested including transportation assistance because missing the bus could mean losing your job. They worked late some nights, ordering takeout and spreading papers across his conference table, building something that felt bigger than both of them. And slowly, without either of them quite noticing, the dynamic shifted. He stopped being her boss and started being her partner. She stopped being intimidated and started being honest. One evening, as they packed up to leave, Marcus looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Can I ask you something personal? Naomi tensed. Sure. Why did you stop? That morning on the sidewalk, you knew you'd be late. You knew what would happen. Why didn't you just keep walking? She was quiet for a moment. Because I couldn't. I saw someone who needed help, and I couldn't just walk away. She met his eyes. Even if it cost me everything, I'd do it again. He nodded slowly. I believe you. 3 weeks into the job, Naomi's life had transformed in ways that still felt surreal. She'd moved Jordan to a better school with a music program he'd been begging for. She'd paid off her credit card debt. She'd taken her car to a real mechanic instead of praying the check engine light would magically turn off. But the biggest change was internal. She walked differently now, spoke differently. When she looked in the mirror, she saw someone who belonged in that expensive office, who deserved to sit at that table. She was still Naomi Brooks, single mother from the South Side, but she was also Naomi Brooks, executive assistant to the CEO. And somehow, impossibly, both things were true. Friday afternoon, Marcus called her into his office with an unusual request. There's a fundraising gala tomorrow night. Major donors, board members, potential investors. I need to make an appearance, but honestly, I hate these things. He smiled ruefully. Would you be willing to come? Strictly professional, but I'd appreciate having someone there who actually cares about what we're building. Naomi's mind immediately went to her closet. I don't have anything to wear to something like that. Expense it. Get whatever you need. Marcus, Naomi, this is part of the job. And besides, he grinned, I have to suffer through 3 hours of small talk with people who think wealth equals virtue. The least you can do is suffer with me. She laughed despite herself. When you put it that way. The next evening, Naomi stood in front of her bathroom mirror wearing a dress that cost more than her first car. It was deep emerald green, simple but elegant, and when Simone had seen it during their emergency shopping trip, she'd literally gasped. Jordan sat on the couch, playing on his tablet, looking up when she emerged. Whoa, Mom, you look like a movie star. I look ridiculous. You look beautiful. The car Marcus sent, an actual town car with a driver, picked her up at 7. She slid into the leather seat feeling like an imposter, like someone was going to jump out and yell, "Gotcha!" and reveal this whole thing had been an elaborate prank. But the car pulled up to the Grandview Hotel, and a valet opened her door, and suddenly she was walking into a ballroom that looked like something out of a fairy tale. Crystal chandeliers, floor-to-ceiling windows, Women in gowns that probably cost more than she made in a year, even with her new salary. She spotted Marcus near the bar, talking to a silver-haired man in a tuxedo. He'd traded his crutches for a walking cane, and even injured, he commanded the room in a way Naomi envied. He saw her and smiled, and for just a moment, everyone else disappeared. Marcus excused himself from his conversation and crossed the ballroom with his cane tapping softly against the marble floor. Up close, Naomi could see the strain around his eyes, the kind that came from smiling at people you didn't particularly like while pretending you were having the time of your life. "You came," he said, and there was genuine relief in his voice. "You asked me to." "I know, but I wasn't sure you would." He gestured toward the crowd. "Welcome to the part of my job I'd pay someone else to do if I could." She glanced around at the sea of designer suits and cocktail dresses, at conversations happening in clusters like exclusive little kingdoms. "How long do we have to stay?" 3 hours. Maybe 2.5 if we're lucky, and someone gets drunk early. That's very specific. I've been doing this for 12 years. You learn to calculate escape windows. He offered his arm. "Come on. Let me introduce you to some people who will pretend to care about philanthropy while actually calculating how it benefits their tax situation." She took his arm, and they moved through the room together. Marcus introduced her to board members, investors, donors, a parade of names and faces that blurred together after the first 20 minutes. But she noticed something. When Marcus talked about the Bright Horizon initiative, his whole demeanor changed. The polite mask fell away, and something real emerged. "We're building support systems for the people who make our company run," he told a woman dripping in diamonds. "Childcare assistance, emergency funds, mental health resources. Because a company is only as strong as the people it employs." The woman nodded with the kind of smile that never reached her eyes. "How progressive." After she walked away, Marcus muttered under his breath, "She pays her housekeeper minimum wage and thinks she's generous because she gives her leftovers." Naomi bit back a laugh. "You don't like these people very much, do you? Some of them are genuinely good. Most of them are just wealthy." He paused. "There's a difference." They found a quiet corner near the windows, away from the main crowd, and Marcus signaled a waiter who brought them champagne in flutes, so delicate Naomi was afraid to hold hers too tightly. "Thank you for coming," Marcus said. "Really, this is a lot easier with you here. I'm not doing anything. You're being real. That's everything." He took a sip of champagne, winced slightly. "I grew up in rooms like this. My father was a hedge fund manager. My mother organized charity galas. I was raised to believe that success meant accumulating wealth and power, and that everything else was secondary." Naomi listened, surprised by the sudden vulnerability. "It took me a long time to realize that was empty," Marcus continued. "I built Solara. I made money. I got everything I was supposed to want, and I woke up one day and realized I didn't recognize the person I'd become." He looked at her. "That morning on the sidewalk when you stopped, you reminded me of something I'd forgotten." "What?" "That kindness still exists, that not everyone is just calculating angles and advantages." He set down his glass. "You didn't know who I was. You just saw someone who needed help." Before Naomi could respond, a voice cut through the moment like a knife through silk. "Marcus, there you are." They both turned. A woman was walking toward them, and Naomi felt something shift in the air, something cold and sharp. She was stunning in the way that came from genetics and expensive maintenance, tall and blonde, with the kind of bone structure that belonged on magazine covers. Her dress was white and probably cost more than Naomi's car used to be worth. Marcus's expression went carefully neutral. "Victoria." "It's been too long." Victoria smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. She glanced at Naomi with the kind of look that managed to be both dismissive and assessing. "And who's this?" "This is Naomi Brooks, my executive assistant. Naomi, this is Victoria Ashford." The last name clicked. Naomi had heard it before in passing conversations around the office. Victoria Ashford Ellington, Marcus's ex-wife. "Assistant," Victoria repeated, as if testing the word. How lovely. Marcus always did have excellent help. The condescension was subtle but unmistakable. Naomi felt it land like a slap. "Victoria." Marcus's voice carried a warning. "What are you doing here?" "The same thing as everyone else, supporting worthy causes. making appearances. She touched his arm with casual familiarity. We need to talk about the foundation board. There are some concerns. This isn't the time. Then when? You've been avoiding my calls. I've been busy. Too busy for me? That's new. Victoria's smile sharpened. 5 minutes, that's all I'm asking. Marcus looked at Naomi, something apologetic in his expression. Would you excuse me? Just for a moment. Naomi nodded, even though every instinct told her this was a terrible idea. She watched them walk away toward a private alcove, Victoria's hand still resting on Marcus's arm like a brand of ownership. Left alone, Naomi felt the room close in around her. She was suddenly aware of how out of place she was. A woman in a borrowed dress, pretending to belong in a world that had never been meant for her. She moved toward the bar, ordered water, and tried to look like she had somewhere to be. You're with Marcus Ellington. Naomi turned. A man in his 60s stood beside her, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, holding a scotch. There was something in his expression she couldn't quite read. I work with him, yes. William Granger. I'm on the Solara board. He extended a hand and Naomi shook it. I saw you two talking earlier. You seemed close. We work well together. That's good. Marcus needs people he can trust. William took a sip of his drink. Especially now. What do you mean? Victoria, his ex-wife. She's been making noise about wanting a seat on the foundation board when it launches. Some people think it's because she genuinely cares about the cause. Others think it's because she wants to stay close to Marcus. Naomi kept her expression neutral. I wouldn't know about that. Of course not. William smiled, but it wasn't warm. Just be careful. Victoria has a way of getting what she wants. And right now, I think what she wants is her ex-husband back. He walked away, leaving Naomi standing alone with a glass of water and a growing sense of unease. She glanced across the room and saw Marcus and Victoria still talking, their heads close together, Victoria's hand now on his chest in a gesture that looked intimate even from a distance. 20 minutes later, Marcus returned. His jaw was tight, his expression carefully controlled. I'm sorry, he said. That took longer than expected. It's fine. It's not. Victoria has a talent for making simple conversations complicated. She seems to care about you. Marcus's laugh was bitter. She cares about what I represent, success, status, the life she thinks she's entitled to. He ran a hand through his hair. We were married for 8 years, divorced for 3, and she still acts like I'm her property. What did she want? To discuss her role in the Bright Horizon initiative. She thinks she should be on the board. And? I told her no. The foundation is about helping people who actually need help, not creating photo opportunities for her social media. He sighed. She didn't take it well. They stayed another hour making rounds, shaking hands, playing the parts they were expected to play. But something had shifted. Marcus was quieter, more distant, and Naomi couldn't shake the image of Victoria's hand on his chest, the familiarity between them that spoke of history she couldn't compete with. When the car finally dropped her off at her apartment building at 11:30, Naomi sat in the back seat for a moment before getting out, trying to process everything that had happened. The gala, the conversations, Victoria, the way Marcus had looked at her before his ex-wife appeared. Inside, Simone was asleep on the couch. She'd agreed to watch Jordan for the evening, and Jordan was curled up in his bed with his Captain America comforter pulled up to his chin. Naomi changed out of the expensive dress, hung it carefully in her closet, and lay in bed staring at the ceiling. She was in dangerous territory, and she knew it. This wasn't just a job anymore. The following Monday, Naomi arrived at the office to find Carolyn waiting at her desk with an expression that immediately set off alarm bells. We need to talk, Carolyn said quietly. They stepped into an empty conference room, and Carolyn closed the door. What happened? Naomi asked. Victoria Ashford called this morning. She wants to schedule a meeting with you. Naomi frowned. With me? Why? She said she wants to discuss the Bright Horizon initiative. Get your perspective as someone who's working closely with Marcus on the project. Carolyn's expression was careful. I think you should decline. Why? Because Victoria doesn't do anything without an agenda, and right now, I think her agenda is you. I don't understand. Carolyn sat down, gestured for Naomi to do the same. I've worked for Marcus for 7 years. I was here through the divorce. I know how Victoria operates, she paused. She doesn't like threats. I'm not a threat. You are. You have something she wants, Marcus's attention, his respect, his trust. And she's not the kind of woman who accepts that gracefully. Naomi's stomach tightened. What should I do? Decline the meeting, politely. Say you're too busy, and be very, very careful about how you interact with Marcus in public. We're just colleagues. Carolyn looked at her with something like sympathy. Are you? The question hung in the air between them like smoke. Naomi declined Victoria's meeting request through Carolyn, citing a packed schedule. But Victoria wasn't deterred. Over the next week, she appeared at the office 3 times, always with some excuse. A lunch meeting with a board member, a consultation with the legal team, a charity event she was planning that she wanted Marcus's input on. Each time, she made a point of stopping by Naomi's desk. Still here, Victoria said on her 3rd visit, her smile bright and cold. You must be very good at what you do. I try. I'm sure you do. Victoria leaned against the desk, casual but deliberate. Marcus speaks very highly of you. It's nice that he's finally found someone he can depend on. The words were complimentary, but the tone suggested otherwise. He's a good boss, Naomi said carefully. He's more than that, isn't he? He's the kind of man who inspires loyalty, devotion. Victoria's eyes were sharp. Just be careful you don't confuse professional admiration with something else. Marcus has a tendency to blur those lines. Naomi kept her expression neutral. I appreciate the advice. Do you? Victoria straightened. Good, because I'd hate to see you get hurt. She walked away, leaving Naomi with a knot in her stomach that wouldn't untie. That afternoon, Marcus called her into his office for their weekly strategy session on the initiative. They'd been working on the proposal for the pilot program, 20 families selected from Solara's employee base to receive comprehensive support for 6 months, with results tracked and analyzed. I want to announce it at the shareholders' meeting next month, Marcus said, spreading papers across his desk. Make it clear that this isn't just talk. We're actually doing this. Naomi reviewed the budget projections. The board is going to push back on the cost. Let them. I have the votes I need. What about Victoria? Marcus looked up sharply. What about her? She's been here a lot lately. I know. I'm handling it. How? He set down his pen, met her eyes. By being very clear that we're divorced and that she has no role in this company or this initiative. Is she bothering you? Naomi hesitated. She's making her presence known. If she says anything inappropriate, she hasn't. Not directly, she's just… Naomi struggled to find the right words. She's making sure I know where I stand. Marcus's jaw tightened. You stand exactly where you belong, as my partner in this project, as someone I trust completely. He paused. Victoria doesn't get to determine your place here. I do. And you're not going anywhere. The intensity in his voice caught her off guard. For a moment, they just looked at each other, and Naomi felt the air between them shift into something charged and dangerous. Then Marcus's phone rang, shattering the moment. He answered it, and Naomi slipped out of the office, her heart racing for reasons she didn't want to examine too closely. That evening, she picked Jordan up from his new school and listened to him chatter about his music class, about the friend he'd made named David, about the science project on volcanoes he was excited to start. His happiness was a balm to the confusion churning in her chest. At home, while Jordan did homework at the kitchen table, Naomi's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Victoria. I think we got off on the wrong foot. Would you like to meet for coffee? Just us. Woman to woman. Naomi stared at the message. Every instinct told her this was a trap. But another part of her, the part that had spent her whole life trying to be polite, trying to keep the peace, wanted to say yes, to prove she wasn't a threat, to smooth over whatever tension existed. She typed back, I appreciate the offer, but I'm very busy with work right now. The response came immediately. Of course. Maybe another time. By the way, Marcus mentioned you have a son. Jordan, right? 10 years old? It must be hard being a single mother. I admire your strength. Naomi's blood went cold. The message was friendly on the surface, but underneath was a clear threat. I know about your son. I know about your life. I can reach you anywhere. She deleted the message and blocked the number. The next day, she told Carolyn what happened. Carolyn's expression darkened. That's crossing a line. You need to tell Marcus. I don't want to create drama. This isn't drama. This is harassment. Carolyn picked up her phone. I'm putting you through to him right now. 10 minutes later, Naomi sat in Marcus's office, showing him the message Victoria had sent. She watched his expression shift from concern to anger. She mentioned Jordan? Yes. Marcus stood up, began pacing despite his still healing ankle. That's unacceptable. Completely unacceptable. I blocked her number. That's not enough. He pulled out his phone, dialed. Victoria, we need to talk. Now. Naomi couldn't hear the other end of the conversation, but Marcus's side was crystal clear. I don't care what you think you're doing, but it stops. Today. Naomi is off limits. Her son is off limits. If you contact her again, I will have legal involved so fast your head will spin. A pause. I'm not threatening you. I'm telling you how this is going to go. You want a relationship with me? Fine. We can have civil conversations about business when necessary. But you do not get to harass my staff. You do not get to use my company as an excuse to insert yourself into my life. And you absolutely do not get to go after someone's child. Another pause. Because I care about her. Marcus's voice was quieter now, but no less firm. And because she deserves better than being caught in whatever game you're playing. He hung up without saying goodbye. The silence in the office was deafening. Naomi sat very still, processing what she'd just heard. Because I care about her. Marcus turned to face her, and there was something raw in his expression. I'm sorry. Victoria has always had boundary issues, but this is beyond anything I expected. You told her you care about me. I do. He said it simply, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. You're important to this company. To the initiative. To... He stopped himself. To what? He was quiet for a long moment. Then he moved back to his desk, sat down heavily. To me, he said finally. You're important to me. And I need you to know that while I value our professional relationship, while I respect the work we're doing together, this situation with Victoria has made me realize something. Naomi's heart was pounding. What? That I've been lying to myself about why I hired you. He met her eyes. Yes, you're talented. Yes, you're exactly what this initiative needs. But the truth is, from the moment you knelt beside me on that sidewalk, I haven't been able to stop thinking about you. Not as an employee. As a person. The confession hung between them like a wire pulled taut. Marcus. I know this is complicated. I know there's a power dynamic here that makes this inappropriate. I know I'm your boss and you're a single mother and you probably think I'm out of my mind. He ran a hand through his hair. But I also know that life is short and moments of genuine connection are rare, and I'd rather be honest with you than spend the next year pretending I don't feel what I feel. Naomi couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Every rule she'd ever learned about professionalism, about boundaries, about protecting yourself in the workplace, was screaming at her to shut this down, to thank him politely and walk away and pretend this conversation never happened. But she didn't. I think about you too, she whispered. Marcus's expression shifted. Surprise, hope, something deeper. You do? I do. And it terrifies me. Why? Because I've spent 10 years building a life for my son. I've made sacrifices. I've chosen safety over risk every single time. And this, she gestured between them. This is the biggest risk I can imagine. I understand. Do you? Because if this goes wrong, I lose everything. My job, my stability, everything Jordan depends on. Marcus stood, moved around the desk until he was standing in front of her. Then we make sure it doesn't go wrong. How? By being careful, by being honest, by not rushing into anything we're not ready for. He reached out, took her hand. Naomi, I'm not asking you to risk everything. I'm asking if you'd be willing to see where this goes. Slowly, carefully, with both of us making sure Jordan comes first and your security is never compromised. She looked down at their joined hands, his larger, scarred from who knows what past injury, hers smaller, marked by years of work. They fit together in a way that felt both natural and impossible. I need time, she said, to think, to process. Take all the time you need. He squeezed her hand gently, then let go. I'm not going anywhere. That night, Naomi sat on her apartment steps after Jordan went to bed, wrapped in an old sweater, staring at the city lights in the distance. Simone sat beside her, nursing a beer and listening to the whole story without interrupting. When Naomi finished, Simone was quiet for a moment. So let me get this straight, Simone said finally. Your billionaire boss, who is fine as hell, by the way, just confessed he has feelings for you, and you're out here acting like this is a problem? It is a problem. Why? Because of everything I just said. The power dynamic, my job security, Jordan. Okay, but answer me this. Simone turned to face her. Do you have feelings for him? Naomi was quiet. That's what I thought. Simone took a sip of beer. Look, I get it. You've been through hell. You've built something from nothing. The idea of risking it is terrifying. But when was the last time you let yourself want something just because you wanted it? Not because it was safe, not because it was smart, just because it made you happy? I don't remember. Exactly. And maybe that's the problem. Simone bumped her shoulder. I'm not saying jump into bed with the man tomorrow. I'm saying don't automatically shut down the possibility of something good just because you're scared. What if it ends badly? What if it doesn't? Naomi laughed, a soft, uncertain sound. You make it sound simple. It's never simple, but sometimes it's worth it anyway. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the city breathe and pulse below them. Somewhere in one of those buildings, Marcus was probably working late, or maybe sitting in his expensive apartment, wondering if he'd just ruined everything. And Naomi realized, with a clarity that was both terrifying and exhilarating, that she didn't want him to be wondering alone. She texted him at 11:30 that night, when Jordan was asleep and the apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of sirens somewhere in the city. Are you awake? The response came in less than 30 seconds. Yes. Are you okay? Can we talk? Not about work. A pause, and then, I'll call you. Her phone rang a moment later, and she answered on the second ring, her heart doing something complicated in her chest. Hi, Marcus said, and even through the phone she could hear the careful hope in his voice. Hi. She moved to the window, looked out at the lights scattered across the city like stars that had fallen and gotten stuck. I've been thinking about what you said. And I'm scared, but I'm also tired of being scared. She took a breath. I don't know what this is or what it could be, but I think I want to find out. The silence on the other end was so complete she thought the call had dropped. Then she heard him exhale, long and slow. You have no idea how much I needed to hear that, Marcus said quietly. I have conditions. Of course you do, and I want to hear all of them. Naomi smiled despite herself. Jordan comes first, always. If this affects him negatively in any way, we stop. Agreed. We keep it private. I'm not ready for the whole office to know, especially not with Victoria circling. Absolutely. And we go slow, like glacially slow, because I need to trust that this is real before I... She stopped, unsure how to finish. Before you risk everything, Marcus finished for her. I understand. Naomi, I'm not asking you to jump off a cliff. I'm asking if you'll let me walk beside you and see where the path goes. That's very poetic for a tech CEO. He laughed, warm and genuine. I have hidden depths. I'm starting to see that. They talked for another hour, the conversation flowing easily from serious to playful and back again. He told her about growing up in boarding schools, about the loneliness of having everything except what mattered. She told him about Jordan's father, who'd left when she was 6 months pregnant, about the years of struggling and fighting and refusing to give up. You're the strongest person I've ever met, Marcus said when she finished. I'm not strong, I'm just stubborn. Those are the same thing, just with different marketing. When they finally hung up, it was past 1 a.m, and Naomi fell asleep with her phone still in her hand and something that felt dangerously close to happiness blooming in her chest. The next morning at work, nothing changed and everything changed. They were still professional, still focused on the Bright Horizon initiative, still navigating the complex dynamics of boss and assistant. But there was an undercurrent now, a awareness that hummed between them like a frequency only they could hear. Carolyn noticed immediately. "Something's different," she said when Marcus was in a board meeting and they were alone in the assistant suite. "What do you mean?" "I've worked with Marcus for 7 years. I know what his happy looks like." Carolyn smiled. "And whatever happened, I'm glad. You're both good people. You deserve good things." Naomi felt her cheeks warm. It's very new and complicated. The best things usually are." Carolyn handed her a folder. "The pilot program applications came in. We need to narrow it down to 20 families." Over the next 2 weeks, Naomi threw herself into the selection process with an intensity that bordered on obsession. Each application represented a real person, a real struggle, a real chance at something better. Single parents working multiple jobs, families one medical emergency away from homelessness. People who reminded her of who she'd been just months ago. She and Marcus reviewed applications late into the evening, debating each choice, making sure they selected families who would benefit most and whose stories would demonstrate the program's impact. "This one," Naomi said, holding up an application. "Michelle Torres, 2 kids, works night shift at a hospital. Her car just died, and she's been taking 3 buses to get to work." Marcus read the application, nodded. "Approved. What else?" "David Chen, single dad, laid off 6 months ago, just found a new job, but he's behind on rent and about to be evicted." "Approved." They worked in a rhythm that felt natural, finishing each other's sentences, understanding without explanation, and sometimes, when their hands brushed reaching for the same folder, or when their eyes met across the desk, the air between them would shift into something charged and dangerous, and absolutely impossible to ignore. One evening, after everyone else had gone home, Marcus stood and stretched, wincing slightly as his healing ankle protested. "How's it feeling?" Naomi asked. "Better. I'll be off the cane next week, apparently." He moved to the window, looked out at the city darkening below. "Come here." She joined him, and they stood side by side, watching the lights come on building by building, the city transforming from day to night. "Do you ever think about how many people are out there?" Marcus said quietly. "How many lives are happening all at once? All those individual struggles and triumphs and moments that feel enormous to the person living them but invisible to everyone else." "Every day," Naomi said, "especially now. Every application we read is someone's entire world condensed into 2 pages. It's humbling." "It is." He turned to look at her, and in the dimming light his expression was open in a way she'd never seen. "Thank you." "For what?" "For helping me remember why any of this matters. Before you, I was going through motions, building things because that's what I knew how to do. But you've shown me what it means to build something that actually changes lives." Naomi's throat tightened. "You're giving me too much credit." "I'm giving you exactly the amount you deserve." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The touch was gentle, barely there, but it sent electricity down her spine. "Can I take you to dinner? Somewhere quiet. Just us." "Like a date?" "Exactly like a date." She should say no. She should maintain boundaries, keep things professional, protect herself and Jordan from the potential fallout. But she was so tired of should, so tired of being careful. "Okay," she whispered. They went that Friday to a small Italian restaurant in a neighborhood far enough from downtown that they wouldn't run into anyone from Solara. The place was intimate and warm, with candles on red checkered tablecloths and the smell of garlic and basil hanging in the air like perfume. Marcus had made a reservation under a different name, and they were seated in a corner booth that felt like its own little world. For the first time since they'd met, there was no work between them. No applications to review, no strategies to plan, no professional distance to maintain, just 2 people sharing a meal. "Tell me something I don't know about you," Marcus said after they'd ordered. "Like what?" "Anything. Something real." Naomi thought for a moment. "I wanted to be a teacher, before Jordan, before everything. I had 2 years of college done, studying education. I was going to teach elementary school, help kids who were struggling like I struggled." "What happened?" "Life. I got pregnant, dropped out, And by the time Jordan was born, teaching felt like someone else's dream. She took a sip of wine. I told myself I'd go back eventually, but eventually kept getting pushed further away. You could still go back. Maybe. I don't know if I want to anymore. The work we're doing with the initiative, it feels like teaching in a different way, helping people build better lives. Marcus nodded. I understand that. The pivot from one dream to another. What was your dream? Before all this? He smiled, a little sheepish. Architecture. I wanted to design buildings, not for corporations or profit, but spaces where people could actually live better. Affordable housing with dignity built into every detail. Why didn't you? My father. He had my whole life planned. Business school, then taking over his firm, then building my own empire. Architecture was too creative, too impractical, too beneath the Ellington name. Marcus's expression darkened slightly. I followed his path because I didn't know how not to. By the time I realized I could choose differently, I was already too deep into the life he'd designed for me. Do you regret it? Sometimes. But then I think about what I'm building now, and I think maybe the path I took was necessary to get here. He reached across the table, took her hand. To this moment. With you. The words hung between them, intimate and terrifying. Naomi looked at their joined hands and wondered how she'd gotten here, how in the span of a few months her entire world had shifted on its axis. Victoria called me again, she said quietly. Marcus's expression hardened. When? Yesterday. Different number. She said she wanted to apologize for overstepping, that she'd been stressed about the foundation launch and took it out on me. Naomi paused. Then she asked if you and I were seeing each other. What did you tell her? I said my relationship with you was professional and none of her business. Then I hung up. Good. She has no right to that information. Marcus squeezed her hand. Has she contacted you since? No, but I don't think she's done. Probably not. Victoria doesn't give up easily. It's one of the things I used to admire about her. He said it without emotion, like talking about a stranger. But her persistence became obsession. She couldn't accept that we wanted different things, that I'd changed and she hadn't. What did you want? Something real. A partnership, not a performance. She wanted the life we'd built, the galas, the appearances, the power couple image. I wanted someone who'd sit with me in sweatpants, eating takeout, and talking about things that actually mattered. Naomi smiled. That's very specific. I've had a lot of time to think about what I actually want. The waiter brought their food, pasta for her, risotto for him, and they ate slowly, talking about everything and nothing. Jordan's progress in school, Marcus's terrible attempts at cooking, the books they'd read, the movies they'd loved, the small, ordinary details that built a life. It felt dangerously normal. After dinner, Marcus drove her home in his car, a sleek black sedan that was worth more than most houses, but somehow didn't feel pretentious when he was driving it. They pulled up outside her apartment building, and for a moment they just sat there, neither wanting the evening to end. I had a really good time, Naomi said. So did I. Marcus turned to face her. Can we do this again? I'd like that. He leaned closer, slow and careful, giving her every opportunity to pull away. And when his lips met hers, soft and questioning, the world narrowed to just that point of contact. The kiss was gentle, almost reverent, and when they pulled apart, Naomi's heart was racing like she'd just run a marathon. I should go, she whispered. I know. But neither of them moved. Finally, Naomi forced herself to open the door. Good night, Marcus. Good night. She walked to her building without looking back, but she could feel his eyes on her until she disappeared inside. In the elevator, she touched her lips and smiled like an idiot. Simone was waiting in her apartment. She'd agreed to watch Jordan for the evening and took one look at Naomi's face and grinned. Oh, you are in so much trouble. Shut up. You kissed him. Maybe. Definitely. You have that look. Simone grabbed her purse. I want details tomorrow, all of them. After she left, Naomi checked on Jordan, who was asleep with his headphones still on, probably fell asleep listening to music. She gently removed them, pulled his blanket up, and kissed his forehead. "I'm trying to do the right thing," she whispered to his sleeping form. "I hope I'm not messing this up." The next few weeks passed in a careful dance. At work, they maintained professional boundaries, but after hours, in stolen moments, and quiet dinners, they built something real. Marcus met Jordan carefully, casually, as Mom's boss who wanted to take them to the Science Museum, and Naomi watched nervously as two of the most important people in her life circled each other like cautious cats. But Jordan, with the straightforward honesty of a 10-year-old, just asked Marcus if he liked dinosaurs. And when Marcus launched into an enthusiastic discussion about how velociraptors were actually the size of chickens, Jordan decided he was okay. "He's cool," Jordan told her later. "For an old guy." "He's not that old." "He's older than you." "By 9 years," Jordan shrugged. "That's old." The Bright Horizon initiative moved toward launch with gathering momentum. They'd selected their 20 families, secured funding, hired staff to manage day-to-day operations. The announcement was scheduled for the shareholders' meeting in 2 weeks, and Naomi was preparing her portion of the presentation, the human story behind the numbers, the faces that would represent what they were building. But the closer they got to launch, the more Victoria's presence intensified. She showed up at the office more frequently, always with some legitimate business excuse, always managing to corner Marcus for quick conversations that stretched into 30 minutes. And always making a point to acknowledge Naomi with a smile that never reached her eyes. "She's circling," Carolyn observed one afternoon, "like a shark that smells blood." What does she want? Same thing she's always wanted. Marcus, the life they had. Control. Carolyn paused. She also knows the foundation launch is happening, and she knows she's not part of it. That's eating at her. "Should I be worried?" "Be careful. Victoria is smart and vindictive, and she has resources most people can only dream of." Carolyn's expression was serious. "Watch your back." The warning proved prescient. 3 days before the shareholders' meeting, Naomi arrived at work to find an envelope on her desk. No return address, just her name written in elegant script. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a photograph, printed in color. Marcus and Naomi leaving the Italian restaurant, his hand on her back, her face tilted up toward his. The angle suggested it was taken from across the street with a long lens. No note, no message, just the image. Naomi's hand shook as she stared at it. Someone had been watching them, following them, documenting them. She walked into Marcus's office without knocking. He looked up from his computer, smiled, then saw her face, and the smile died. "What happened?" She handed him the envelope, watched his expression shift from confusion to anger as he pulled out the photograph. "Victoria," he said flatly, "you don't know that." "I absolutely know that. This is exactly her style. The threat without the explicit threat. The suggestion that she has ammunition if she chooses to use it." He crumpled the photo in his fist. "I'm calling my lawyer." "Marcus, wait. No, this has gone too far. Harassing you is one thing. Following us, photographing us without our knowledge or consent, that's stalking, and I'm not tolerating it anymore." "What if this makes it worse?" "It's already worse." He picked up his phone. "And I'm ending it now." The conversation that followed was tense and one-sided. Marcus speaking in clipped, furious sentences, his lawyer apparently advising caution, Marcus rejecting that advice. When he hung up, he looked at Naomi with something fierce and protective in his expression. "I'm issuing a cease and desist. If she contacts you again, if she comes within 100 feet of you, if she so much as looks at you wrong, we're filing for a restraining order. She's going to fight back. Let her. I have better lawyers." But Victoria's response came from a direction neither of them expected. That afternoon, an email went out to the entire Solara staff, announcing that Victoria Ashford Ellington had been appointed to the Bright Horizon Initiative Advisory Board, effective immediately. Naomi stared at the email in disbelief. "How is this possible? You said she wasn't going to be involved." Marcus was already on his phone, his voice sharp. "Get me Thomas Webb, now." Thomas Webb was the chairman of Solara's board, and within 15 minutes he was in Marcus's office, looking uncomfortable while Marcus paced like a caged animal. "You went behind my back," Marcus said, his voice dangerously quiet. "The board voted," Thomas said. "Victoria has significant philanthropic experience and connections to donors we need. It made sense. It made sense? Or did Victoria make it worth your while? Thomas's expression flickered. That's inappropriate. What's inappropriate is appointing my ex-wife to a project she has no business being part of without consulting me. You don't have unilateral control over board decisions, Marcus. You know that. This isn't about control. This is about Victoria using her money and influence to insert herself into my life when I've made it very clear I want nothing to do with her. Thomas stood. Your personal feelings don't override what's best for the company. The vote was unanimous. Victoria is on the advisory board. Accept it and move on. After he left, Marcus turned to Naomi. I'm so sorry. It's not your fault. It is. I should have seen this coming, should have protected the initiative better, should have… Marcus. She took his hand. This doesn't change what we're building. An advisory board doesn't have operational control. Victoria can't actually stop us from doing the work. No, but she can make our lives hell trying. He was right. Over the next week, Victoria attended every planning meeting, questioned every decision, and suggested changes that would have diluted the program's mission into something generic and meaningless. She was pleasant, professional, impossible to argue with on the surface. But underneath, Naomi could see the strategy: to frustrate, to delay, to make the initiative fail so she could swoop in as the savior. The night before the shareholders' meeting, Naomi sat in her apartment reviewing her presentation notes for the 100th time. Jordan was at Simone's for a sleepover, and the apartment felt too quiet, too empty, too full of her own spiraling thoughts. Her phone rang. Marcus. I can't sleep, he said without preamble. Me neither. Come over. Marcus, please. I need to see you. She should say no. She should maintain boundaries, especially now with everything so complicated. But she grabbed her keys anyway. His apartment was in a high-rise downtown, all glass and steel and views that made her dizzy. He answered the door in jeans and a t-shirt, looking more vulnerable than she'd ever seen him. Thank you for coming, he said. They sat on his couch, and he poured them both wine, and for a while they didn't talk about Victoria or the initiative or the presentation tomorrow. They just sat together, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her, finding comfort in proximity. Whatever happens tomorrow, Marcus said quietly, I want you to know something. What? This thing between us. It's real. It matters. And I'm not letting Victoria or anyone else destroy it. Naomi lifted her head to look at him. I'm scared. Of what? Of everything. Of this being too good to be true. Of waking up and realizing I don't actually belong in your world. You belong exactly where you choose to be, and I hope you choose to be here. He kissed her then, and it was different from their first kiss, deeper, more urgent, full of everything they'd been holding back. And when he pulled her closer, when his hands found her waist and hers found his hair, Naomi stopped thinking about tomorrow and let herself just be here, now, with him. They didn't sleep together that night. Both of them knew that crossing that line required more time, more certainty, but they stayed on that couch until dawn painted the city pink and gold, wrapped in each other, building a foundation of trust one quiet moment at a time. When Naomi finally left to go home and prepare for the day ahead, Marcus walked her to the door and kissed her one more time. Whatever happens today, he said, we face it together. Together, she agreed. And for the first time since the photograph arrived on her desk, she believed they might actually survive what was coming. The shareholders' meeting was held in the grand ballroom of the Meridian Hotel, a space designed to intimidate with its soaring ceilings and walls of windows that framed the city like a painting. By 9 in the morning, 300 people filled the room, board members, major shareholders, investors, analysts, all of them holding the power to greenlight or destroy what Naomi and Marcus had spent months building. Naomi stood backstage, her presentation notes trembling slightly in her hands. She'd practiced her portion 50 times, knew every word, every transition, every emotional beat. But knowing and doing were different animals, and right now her stomach felt like it was trying to climb out through her throat. Marcus appeared beside her, immaculate in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her first car, but his eyes were warm, grounding. You're going to be incredible, he said quietly. What if I freeze? What if I mess up the numbers? What if… He took her hands, stilling them. Then You take a breath and keep going. These people need to hear your story. Not perfectly, just honestly. Easy for you to say. You've done this 100 times. And I'm terrified every single time. He smiled. The fear means it matters. Use it. Before she could respond, Thomas Webb appeared, clipboard in hand, expression pinched. 5 minutes. Marcus, you're opening with the quarterly review, then transitioning to the initiative. Naomi, you're up after the overview slides. Marcus nodded, squeezed Naomi's hands once more, then walked toward the stage entrance. Thomas turned to leave, then paused. Ms. Brooks, a word of advice. Keep your portion factual. These people respond to data, not sob stories. Naomi felt her spine straighten. The data tells half the story. The people behind it tell the other half. Thomas's expression suggested he disagreed but didn't have time to argue. He walked away, and Naomi was alone with her racing heart and the distant murmur of 300 conversations happening on the other side of that curtain. The lights dimmed. The conversations faded. Marcus walked onto the stage to polite applause, and Naomi watched from the wings as he commanded the room with the ease of someone born to it. He covered quarterly earnings, market expansion, new contracts, all the business machinery that kept Solara running. His voice was confident, his presence undeniable. Then he shifted gears. Now I want to talk about something different, Marcus said, and the room leaned forward slightly. We've spent 12 years building Solara into an industry leader. We've prioritized growth, efficiency, profit margins, and we've been successful by every conventional measure. He paused. Let that sink in. But success without purpose is just accumulation. And I've come to realize that the metrics we celebrate, revenue, stock price, market share, tell us nothing about whether we're actually making the world better, or whether the people who make our success possible are able to build stable lives for themselves and their families. A murmur rippled through the audience. This wasn't the usual shareholder meeting rhetoric. 6 months ago, I had an experience that changed my perspective, Marcus continued. I was injured in an accident downtown, and while I lay on the sidewalk waiting for help, most people walked past. But one woman stopped. She stayed with me, missed work, risked her job to make sure I wasn't alone. Naomi's breath caught. She hadn't known he was going to talk about that. That woman was Naomi Brooks, who worked in our operations department at the time, and when she finally made it to the office, she was terminated for being late. His voice carried a weight that silenced the room. She lost her job because she chose compassion over punctuality, because our policies punished humanity. The silence was absolute now. I rehired her. Not out of guilt, but because I recognized something in that moment. The people who make our company run, the ones processing invoices, answering phones, keeping the machinery moving, they're often one emergency away from losing everything. And our policies, our culture, our entire structure was designed to extract maximum productivity while providing minimum security. He clicked to the next slide. The Bright Horizon Initiative logo filled the screen. We're changing that. Today I'm announcing a comprehensive support program for working parents and financially vulnerable employees. Child care assistance, emergency funds, mental health resources, transportation stipends, extended parental leave. We're starting with a pilot program of 20 families, with plans to scale company-wide within 18 months. The numbers appeared on screen: projected costs, implementation timelines, success metrics. Naomi watched faces in the audience shift from curious to skeptical to calculating. I know what you're thinking, Marcus said. This is expensive. This will impact margins. And you're right. In the short term, this will cost us. But I'm betting that investing in our people will pay dividends no quarterly report can measure. Lower turnover, higher morale, a culture that attracts and retains the best talent because we actually give a damn about their lives. He clicked again, and Naomi's face appeared on the screen. Her professional headshot, but also candid photos from the application review sessions, from meetings with families, from moments when she was so focused on the work she didn't know she was being photographed. Naomi Brooks is now my executive assistant and the architect of this initiative. She's lived the reality we're trying to change, and I've asked her to share what this program means, not in abstract terms, but in human ones. Naomi? That was her cue. She walked onto the stage on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else, found her mark beside Marcus, and looked out at 300 faces that suddenly felt like 3 million. The lights were bright. The silence was crushing, and for one terrible moment, her mind went completely blank. Then she found Marcus's eyes. He nodded, almost imperceptibly. She took a breath and began. 4 months ago, I was a single mother, working an administrative job, living paycheck to paycheck, terrified every single day that one unexpected expense would destroy the life I'd built for my son. Her voice was quieter than Marcus's, but steady. I know what it's like to choose between paying rent and buying groceries, to work when you're sick because you can't afford to miss a shift, to smile at your child and tell him everything's fine while you're calculating in your head whether you can stretch a jar of peanut butter for another week. She saw some faces in the audience shift, recognition, maybe, or discomfort. The morning I helped Mr. Ellington, I made a choice. I chose to be human, and it cost me my job. She paused. But it also showed me something I'd forgotten. That there are people who see value beyond profit margins, who understand that a company is only as strong as the people it employs, and that those people deserve dignity, security, and support. She clicked to the next slide. Faces appeared. The 20 families selected for the pilot program. Real people with real names and real stories. Michelle Torres works night shifts as a hospital custodian. She has 2 kids and no car. She spends 4 hours a day on buses just getting to and from work. Our program is providing her with transportation assistance and childcare so she can take a day shift and actually see her children. Next slide. David Chen is a single father who was laid off 6 months ago. He just found new employment, but he's 3 months behind on rent and facing eviction. Our emergency fund gave him a bridge so he could get back on his feet without losing his home. She moved through each family, each story, each life that would be changed by what they were building. And as she spoke, something shifted in the room. The skepticism didn't disappear, but it softened. These weren't numbers anymore. They were people. I'm not going to stand here and tell you this is charity, Naomi said, her voice stronger now. This is investment. Investment in retention, in productivity, in building a company culture that doesn't just extract value but creates it. These 20 families will be tracked over 6 months. We'll measure absenteeism, performance, satisfaction, turnover. And I'm confident the data will prove what I already know, that when you support your employees, they show up differently. They work harder. They stay longer. They become your best ambassadors. She clicked to the final slide. Projected outcomes, cost-benefit analysis, long-term ROI. This isn't about feeling good. It's about being smart. It's about recognizing that human capital is actual capital and that investing in it makes business sense. She paused, looked out at the audience. 4 months ago, I was one missed paycheck from disaster. Today I'm standing here because someone saw my value and gave me a chance. This initiative is about extending that same chance to others. Not out of pity, out of recognition that they deserve it. She stepped back. The room was silent for a heartbeat, then 2. Then someone started clapping. Then another. Then the applause built like a wave, rolling through the ballroom until most of the room was on their feet. Naomi stood frozen, unable to process what was happening. Marcus moved to stand beside her, and when she looked at him, his expression held something that made her chest tight. Pride. Pure and uncomplicated. The applause finally faded, and Marcus took the microphone again. We'll now open for questions. Hands shot up immediately. Marcus pointed to a woman in the 3rd row. Barbara Mitchell, Eastwood Capital. What's the total projected cost of full implementation? Marcus rattled off numbers, budget allocations, funding sources. Naomi listened with half her attention, the other half still processing the fact that she'd just spoken to 300 people and hadn't spontaneously combusted. More questions followed. Some skeptical, some genuinely curious, some clearly designed to poke holes in the plan. Marcus handled them all with practiced ease, and when questions turned to the human element, he directed them to Naomi. She answered each one honestly. Yes, there was risk. Yes, the cost was significant. Yes, they'd need to refine the program based on pilot results, but the core principle remained solid. Invest in people. Reap the benefits. 30 minutes into Q&A, Victoria raised her hand. Naomi's stomach dropped. Marcus's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Victoria Ashford Ellington, advisory board member. Her voice was smooth, professional, lethal. I want to commend the passion behind this initiative. It's clear Ms. Brooks speaks from experience, and that's valuable. The compliment felt like a knife wrapped in silk. However, Victoria continued, I have concerns about the selection process for pilot families. What safeguards are in place to ensure selections are made objectively and not based on personal biases or relationships? The implication was clear as glass. She was suggesting that Naomi's involvement compromised the integrity of the program. Marcus started to respond, but Naomi stepped forward. Every application was reviewed by a committee of 5 people, she said calmly, including HR leadership, program administrators, and independent consultants with expertise in social services. I participated in reviews, but I didn't have unilateral authority. Each selection required unanimous committee approval based on predetermined criteria: financial need, family composition, employment stability, and potential for measurable improvement. Victoria's smile didn't waver. Of course. And your personal relationship with Mr. Ellington didn't influence the process in any way? The room went silent. Naomi felt every eye turned toward her, felt the weight of the insinuation settling over the audience like fog. Marcus moved to the microphone, his voice sharp. That question is inappropriate and irrelevant to the initiative's merit. Is it? Victoria's tone remained pleasant. I think shareholders have a right to know whether the people designing these programs have conflicts of interest that might affect their judgment. My judgment, Marcus said coldly, is that this company has operated for too long with policies that prioritize profit over people. And if you're suggesting that Ms. Brooks' involvement is somehow problematic, I'd remind everyone here that she was selected for this role based on merit, experience, and a perspective this company desperately needed. I'm sure she was. Victoria's expression was serene. I'm simply raising questions that others might be too polite to ask. The tension in the room was suffocating. Naomi saw board members exchanging glances, saw analysts scribbling notes, saw the careful neutrality on Thomas Webb's face that suggested he'd known this was coming. She stepped to the microphone before Marcus could respond again. Ms. Ashford Ellington raises a fair point, Naomi said, and felt Marcus tense beside her. Transparency is crucial for a program like this. So let me be completely transparent. She looked directly at Victoria. I was fired from this company for being late to work because I stopped to help someone in an accident. That someone was Mr. Ellington. He subsequently rehired me in a different capacity because he recognized that our company's policies were punishing exactly the kind of behavior we should be encouraging: compassion, humanity, putting people before punctuality. She paused, choosing her next words carefully. Since then, I have worked closely with Mr. Ellington to design this initiative. Our working relationship is professional, collaborative, and focused entirely on building something that will benefit employees across this company. If you're implying there's something inappropriate about that relationship, I'd suggest the real inappropriateness is using this forum to make baseless insinuations designed to undermine a program that will help 20 families get stable footing. The room was dead silent. As for conflicts of interest, Naomi continued, the only conflict I see is between a culture that treats employees as disposable resources and a vision that treats them as human beings worthy of investment. I know which side I'm on. The question is which side this company wants to be on. She stepped back from the microphone. Her heart was hammering so hard she thought everyone could hear it, but her hands were steady. Victoria's expression had finally cracked, just slightly. The pleasant mask slipped, revealing something cold and furious beneath. Marcus took the microphone. If there are no further questions about the actual initiative, we'll move to the vote. The vote was a formality at this point. Marcus had secured the necessary board support weeks ago, but watching the results appear on the screen still felt surreal. 87% approval. The Bright Horizon initiative was officially greenlit. The meeting adjourned. People flooded toward the exits, conversations erupting in clusters. Naomi stood on the stage, feeling like she'd just run a marathon while being chased by wolves. Marcus turned to her. That was stupid, reckless, career suicide? Brave, necessary, perfect. He smiled. You just told off my ex-wife in front of 300 shareholders and came out looking like a hero. I don't feel like a hero. I feel like I'm about to throw up. That's the adrenaline. Come on, let's get out of here before the vultures descend. But before they could move, Victoria appeared at the stage steps. Up close, her composure was back in place, but her eyes were ice. That was quite a performance, Ms. Brooks. It wasn't a performance, it was the truth. Was it? Victoria glanced at Marcus. You really expect me to believe your relationship is purely professional? I saw the way you looked at each other up there. What we expect, Marcus said quietly, is for you to stop using your position on the advisory board to harass my staff and undermine this initiative. You had your chance to be involved constructively. You chose sabotage instead. I chose to ask legitimate questions. You chose to make this personal. Again. Marcus's voice was steel. I've been patient, Victoria. I've tried to be civil. But I'm done. You're off the advisory board, effective immediately. Her expression turned vicious. You can't do that. The board appointed me. And I'm overriding that appointment. I have that authority for advisory positions, and I'm using it. You'll receive official notification this afternoon. This is because of her. Victoria's voice shook slightly. You're choosing her over everything we built. We didn't build anything. We built a facade. And I spent 8 years trapped inside it. Marcus took Naomi's hand right there in front of Victoria and anyone else who was watching. I'm choosing someone who actually sees me, who challenges me, who makes me want to build something real. Victoria stared at their joined hands like they were a personal insult. Then, without another word, she turned and walked away, her heels clicking against the marble floor like gunshots. Naomi exhaled shakily. That's going to have consequences. Probably. But I don't care anymore. Marcus looked at her. Are you okay? I think so. Ask me again in an hour when the shock wears off. They left through a back exit, avoiding the crowd, and ended up in Marcus's car in the hotel parking garage. For a long moment, they just sat there, the adrenaline slowly draining away. You were incredible up there, Marcus said quietly. The way you spoke, the way you handled Victoria. Naomi, you have no idea how powerful that was. I was terrified. It didn't show. You looked like someone who belonged on that stage, like someone who's been fighting her whole life and finally found a battle worth winning. She laughed, a little unsteady. That's very poetic. It's true. He reached over, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. I meant what I said up there. About choosing you. About wanting to build something real. In front of 300 people and your ex-wife. Especially in front of them. Because I'm tired of hiding what I feel. Tired of pretending this is just professional when it stopped being just professional the moment you knelt beside me on that sidewalk. Naomi's throat tightened. Marcus, I love you, he said simply. I know it's too soon and probably terrible timing and complicated by every power dynamic imaginable, but I love you, and I needed you to know that before another second passed where you might doubt it. The words hung between them, huge and terrifying and absolutely impossible to take back. I love you too, Naomi whispered, and that scares me more than anything I've ever felt. Why? Because loving someone means they can hurt you. It means trusting them with everything, your heart, your life, your child's future. And I've been burned before. I've been left before. I've learned not to rely on anyone but myself. Marcus took both her hands. I can't promise I'll never hurt you. I'm human and flawed, and I'll definitely screw up sometimes. But I can promise I'll never leave. I can promise I'll show up every day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Well, she looked at him. This man who'd started as a stranger on a sidewalk and become someone she couldn't imagine her life without, and made a choice. Okay, she said. Okay? Okay, I trust you. Okay, we try this. Okay, I'm terrified, but I'm doing it anyway. She smiled through the tears that were suddenly blurring her vision. Okay. He kissed her then, right there in the parking garage, with the smell of exhaust and the echo of car doors slamming. And it felt like every first kiss should feel, like the beginning of something that might actually last. 2 weeks later, Naomi stood in the community center where the Bright Horizon Initiative was hosting its official launch event. The 20 pilot families were there, along with Solara employees, local media, and community leaders. Tables were set up with information about each program component. Children ran around eating cookies. Adults asked questions and filled out paperwork and looked at Naomi with expressions that ranged from grateful to cautiously hopeful. Michelle Torres approached, her 2 kids in tow. "Miss Brooks, I just wanted to say thank you. The transportation assistance, I started the day shift last week. I actually get to have dinner with my kids now." "That's wonderful," Naomi said, and meant it with her whole heart. "And the childcare stipend means my daughter can stay in her after-school program. She's been asking to join the chess club, and now she can." Michelle's eyes were bright. "You don't know what this means, how much it changes." "I do, actually. I've been where you are." "Then you know this isn't just help, it's hope." After Michelle walked away, Marcus appeared at Naomi's side. "The local news wants an interview. You up for it?" "Do I have a choice?" "Not really. You're the face of this thing now." She did the interview, talking about the program's goals and the families it would serve. She smiled for photos and shook hands and played the part she was still learning to inhabit, someone who belonged in rooms where decisions were made and lives were changed. When the event finally wound down and the last families trickled out, Naomi found a quiet corner and sat down with a sigh. Jordan appeared. Simone had brought him halfway through and climbed into the chair beside her. "This is pretty cool, Mom." "Yeah. Yeah. You're like a superhero, but for real stuff instead of aliens and robots." She laughed. "I'm definitely not a superhero." "You are to those families." He paused. "Marcus thinks so too. He told me when you were doing the interview." "He said that?" "He said you're the bravest person he knows, that you fight for people who can't fight for themselves." Jordan looked at her with those old soul eyes that sometimes seem too wise for 10. "Do you love him?" The question caught her off guard. "What makes you ask that?" "Because he looks at you like how Dad was supposed to look at you but never did. And you look at him the same way." Naomi was quiet for a moment. "Would that be okay? If I did?" Jordan thought about it seriously. "Is he nice to you?" "Very nice." "Does he make you happy?" "He does." "Does he like dinosaurs and think my jokes are funny?" "He does both those things." "Then it's okay." Jordan shrugged. "You deserve to be happy, Mom. You've been sad for a long time. You just hit it good." She pulled him into a hug, this boy who'd grown up too fast, who'd seen too much, who somehow still had the capacity to give her permission to love again. "When did you get so smart?" "I've always been smart. You're just now noticing." That evening, after Jordan was asleep and the apartment was quiet, Naomi stood on her small balcony looking out at the city. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Come over, please. I have something to show you." She almost said no. It was late, she was tired, and tomorrow was another long day. But something in the message made her grab her keys anyway. 20 minutes later, she was standing in Marcus's apartment, confused because he'd led her to the windows and told her to wait. "What am I waiting for?" "You'll see. 3, 2, 1. Across the street, on the side of the building opposite his apartment, a projection appeared, massive letters bright against the dark glass. Naomi Brooks, the woman who stopped. And beneath it, smaller, "Thank you for showing me what matters." She stared, speechless. The projection stayed for maybe 30 seconds, then faded. That was too much? Completely over the top? Possibly illegal without the proper permits? All of those things. She turned to him. And perfect. He pulled her close. "I wanted you to know that what you did today, what you've been doing, it matters. You matter. Not just to me, but to every person whose life you're changing. I couldn't do any of it without you. We're doing it together. That's the point." He kissed her forehead. "I talked to Jordan today, while you were being interviewed. He mentioned, I asked him how he'd feel about me being around more, about us being official." Naomi pulled back slightly to see his face. "You asked my son for permission to date me? I asked for his blessing. There's a difference." Marcus smiled. He said yes, with conditions. "What conditions?" "That I take him to the science museum once a month, that I never make you sad, and that I teach him how to drive when he's 16. She laughed, something loosening in her chest. Those are very specific conditions. He's a very specific kid. Wonder where he gets that from. They stood at the window, wrapped in each other, watching the city lights paint patterns across the darkness. And Naomi thought about how impossible this would have seemed 6 months ago. How she'd been one woman, terrified and desperate, running to a job that didn't value her to support a life that was always one emergency from collapse. And now she was here, in an apartment that overlooked the whole city, in the arms of a man who saw her, really saw her, building something that would change lives. All because she'd stopped. 3 months later, the pilot program results came in. Absenteeism down 37%, employee satisfaction up 42%, retention at 95%. Every metric proved what Naomi had known in her bones, that investing in people paid dividends no spreadsheet could fully capture. The board approved full company-wide implementation. Other tech companies started calling, asking for consultations. Local government wanted to explore similar programs for municipal employees. The Bright Horizon initiative became bigger than Solara, bigger than one company's attempt to do better. It became a model, a movement, proof that capitalism and compassion didn't have to be enemies. And through it all, Naomi and Marcus built their relationship in quiet moments between the chaos. Dinners with Jordan, Sunday mornings drinking coffee and reading the paper. Arguments about implementation strategies that turned into laughter. Trust built one day at a time, one choice at a time, one moment of showing up when it mattered. Victoria disappeared from their lives as completely as she'd inserted herself into them. Rumor had it she'd moved to New York, taken a position on another company's board, found new battles to fight. Naomi didn't care. That chapter was closed. 6 months after the shareholders' meeting, Solara hosted a gala to celebrate the initiative's success. It was held in the same ballroom where Naomi had first felt out of place, where Victoria had circled like a shark, where everything had felt impossible. But tonight was different. Tonight she walked in wearing a dress she'd chosen herself, her hand in Marcus's, her head high. Jordan was at the kids' table with several children from pilot families, all of them laughing over pizza while their parents celebrated. The program families were there, Michelle Torres in a dress she'd bought with money she'd saved from not spending 4 hours a day on buses. David Chen with his kids, his rent current, his job stable. 20 families who'd been given a chance and seized it with both hands. Naomi was asked to speak, and this time when she walked to the microphone, the room didn't feel overwhelming. It felt like possibility. 6 months ago, I stood in front of shareholders and told them that investing in people was good business, she said. Tonight, I'm standing in front of the people we invested in, and I'm asking you to tell them I was right. What followed was story after story. Parents who'd been able to take better jobs because they had childcare. Families who'd avoided eviction because emergency funds bridged the gap. Employees who'd finally been able to see doctors, fix their cars, buy their kids new shoes. Not stories of charity, stories of dignity restored. When the testimonials ended, Marcus took the microphone for closing remarks. Tonight proves something I've believed for a long time, that the greatest return on investment isn't measured in stock price, it's measured in lives changed. He looked directly at Naomi. And I want to recognize the person who made this possible. Naomi Brooks didn't just design this program. She lived the reality it addresses. She fought for every family here because she knows what it means to fight for your own. He paused, and something in his expression shifted. Naomi, could you come up here? She walked to the stage confused. They'd already done their planned remarks. This wasn't in the program. Marcus took her hand, and in front of 200 people, he got down on one knee. Naomi's breath stopped. The room went silent. 6 months ago, you knelt beside a stranger on a sidewalk and changed both our lives, Marcus said quietly. You showed me what courage looks like, what integrity looks like, what it means to choose compassion even when it costs you everything. He pulled a small box from his jacket pocket. I'm not a perfect man. I'll forget to take out the trash and work too many hours and probably embarrass Jordan with terrible dad jokes. But I promise to show up, every day, for you, for him, for whatever family we build together. He opened the box. A ring caught the light, simple and elegant. Naomi Brooks, will you marry me? The room held its breath. Naomi looked at this man kneeling in front of her, this impossible, wonderful man who'd seen her at her lowest and called it strength, who'd taken her hand and said, "Let's build something better," who'd asked her 10-year-old son for permission and made promises he actually intended to keep. She thought about the woman she'd been 6 months ago, terrified and desperate, running toward a job that would fire her for being human. And she thought about the woman she was now, still scared sometimes, but no longer alone, no longer fighting by herself. "Yes," she said, and the word came out strong and sure. "Yes, I'll marry you." The room erupted. Marcus stood, slipped the ring onto her finger, and kissed her while 200 people applauded, and Jordan stood on a chair at the kids' table, pumping his fist and yelling, "I knew it!" Later that night, after the gala ended and Jordan had fallen asleep in the car on the way home, after Naomi had tucked him into bed and stood in his doorway watching him dream, she found Marcus waiting in her tiny kitchen. "That was quite a proposal," she said. "Too much?" "Completely over the top," she smiled. "Perfect." He pulled her close and they swayed slightly, even though there was no music, just the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic, and two people who'd found each other in the most unlikely circumstances. "I meant everything I said up there," Marcus murmured against her hair, "about showing up, about building a family, about choosing you every single day." "I know. That's why I said yes." "Any regrets?" She thought about it honestly, about the power dynamics and the complications, and the fact that they'd have to navigate a relationship in the public eye, about the adjustment Jordan would face and the learning curve they'd all experience, and the 1,000 small ways this could still go wrong. "No regrets," she said finally. "Just hope. And maybe that's enough." They stood in her small kitchen in her small apartment, the ring on her finger catching the fluorescent light, and made quiet plans for a future that had seemed impossible just months before. A wedding, probably small. A new place to live, somewhere with enough space for all three of them. A life built on foundation of trust earned in moments that mattered. And Naomi realized that this was what she'd been fighting for all along. Not security, not stability, not even happiness exactly. Just the chance to choose love without it being a luxury she couldn't afford. To build something real with someone who saw her value when the rest of the world had walked past. To be the woman who stopped, and in stopping, found everything she'd been running toward. The Bright Horizon initiative continued to grow. Within a year, it expanded to 500 families. Within 2, it became a national model that other companies studied and implemented. Naomi took on a formal leadership role, Director of Employee Advocacy and Support, with a team of 12 people working under her. She finished her degree, taking night classes while working full-time, proving to herself and Jordan that it's never too late to return to abandoned dreams. She and Marcus got married on a Saturday afternoon in a small ceremony with 50 people who actually mattered. Jordan as the ring bearer, Simone as maid of honor, Carolyn dabbing at tears in the front row. They moved into a house in a neighborhood where Jordan could ride his bike, and Marcus could attempt to garden with mixed results. They built a life that was messy and complicated and real. They fought sometimes, the way any couple fights when they're building something from scratch. But they always came back to each other, always chose to show up, always remembered that they'd both been given a second chance, and it would be foolish to waste it. Jordan thrived. He joined the robotics team at his new school, made friends, grew tall and gangly and brilliant, and he watched his mother become someone he'd never seen before, confident, powerful, loved. It changed something in him, seeing that transformation. It taught him that people could change their stories, that circumstances weren't destiny. Years later, when he was 17 and filling out college applications, he wrote his essay about the morning his mother lost her job for helping a stranger, about how that single act of kindness rippled outward, changing not just her life, but hundreds of others, about how he'd learned that courage wasn't fearlessness. It was choosing to do the right thing even when you were terrified. He got into MIT on a full scholarship. Marcus cried at his graduation. Naomi took pictures and pretended she wasn't crying too. And on the night before Jordan left for college, the three of them sat on the back porch of the house they'd made a home, watching fireflies dance in the summer darkness. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. They just sat together, this family they'd built from broken pieces, and let the silence speak what words couldn't. Naomi thought about the woman she'd been, desperate, scared, one moment from catastrophe, and the woman she'd become. Not perfect, still working, still fighting, still facing challenges, but no longer alone, no longer invisible, no longer running toward disaster with no safety net to catch her. She'd stopped on a rainy sidewalk beside a stranger in pain. And in that moment, without knowing it, she'd saved them both. Not from injury, not from death, but from the kind of life that measures worth in stock prices and productivity metrics instead of moments of connection and acts of courage and the simple, revolutionary choice to see another person's humanity. She'd stopped. And in stopping, she'd found her way home.